I zoom out. I ask this question all the time, even to myself, which is, what do I do in great markets? What do I do in terrible markets? What do I do in a fine market? And I try to zoom out and say, am I here to play this game for one day, or am I here to play this game forever? I mean, one of my goals, I'll tell you, and Russ, is my philosophy is, I used to thought the goal was to win, but now my goal is to keep playing.
Welcome to Girls Make Bank, the podcast show for women who want to learn the art of selling for business and for life. I'm Jack White, seasoned sales professional, entrepreneur, and owner of Honeybees Group. Come back each week to hear inspiring stories from some of our favorite business owners. Learn how to take the ache out of selling and make bank. We're all in this together, so let's get started. What if the way you price your services is actually holding your business back? Today, in this episode, I'm joined by Peter Giordano III, who is a pricing specialist for small, founder-led agencies and consulting firms that sell expertise and strategy. So Peter is someone that I follow on LinkedIn and obsess over his content. He helps business owners completely reimagine how they price, not just tweaking numbers, but questioning the assumptions underneath: value, scope, margins. And in this episode, we unpack what makes a high leverage offer suite, how to know when it's time to raise your pricing, and why pricing isn't just about what you charge, it's about the kind of business you are building. Let's get into it. Stick around. So, Peter, without putting you on the spot,
You are.
tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
What do I do? The hardest question in the world to answer. I say this. All right. I'm a pricing strategist. I work with those that sell expertise, thinking, strategy, whatever that you want to call it. Really, that's where I'm focusing on, particularly in the pricing element, pricing and strategy. And it's really with consultants, with boutique firms, with agencies. That's really who I have been partnering with. And what I like to say, ready? This is what I'm going to say, is that when it comes to pricing, it's way more than the tag. And that's really one of the messages that I want to share, which is you kind of have to do all of these things around price in order for your price to actually become apparent, be able to change it to, as we'll say a lot of times today, add more value in a sense. So I'm a pricing strategist and I help those that sell their expertise.
Yes. And so tell me, because I've heard you talk about value-based pricing before. What exactly is that? And what does it look like in practice, specifically for service providers?
Oh, it's hard. Anybody who's listening right now, I will say value-based pricing is very hard. Even me, like I'll even say this is like, I'm working out all the nuances to it, but here's how I would describe it. And here's where I think a lot of people do end up getting wrong, is that whether it's a prepackaged service or productized service, or it is like a true consulting package where you scoped it out. I mean, the thesis behind it is that your price changes based on the value that you deliver, right? That's the simplest form in which value-based pricing is. And where I think how we think about it is you base it relative to outcomes. So let's use a really simple example. And I will go with how we mostly think about it. If I believe, and if you believe, if you are a prospect, that what we agree to has a potential $1 million outcome, right? It is pricing my services relative to that outcome, right? What is the value which I contribute to that outcome? Now, here's the thing. Here's why value-based pricing is really hard. Value-based pricing is really hard because it really requires you to be awesome at discovery, awesome at scoping, really getting clear as to what the value is. Now, the thing with value is that it's not for me to decide, it's actually for you to decide. And that's where it gets really challenging. So I'll continue on my monologue here a little bit with value-based pricing, because while we talk about that million as the basis and then where I price my services relative to that, whether it's like 100,000 or 70,000 or 120,000, you want to give up that gap upside. But here is where I want to start to rewire people's brains in value-based pricing and modify it a little bit, because the $1 million that we just talked about is not all because of me, right? There are aspects associated with that. There is risk associated with that. So how I would like to reframe individuals when they think about value-based pricing is, yes, please consider thinking about outcomes and using price as a mechanism in association with that value. But please consider risk, because there's a risk where it doesn't work. So there may be an 80% risk that $1 million doesn't actually come to fruition.
Right.
Consider that in your pricing. So an 80% to the million is actually only 800,000. So now we're talking about a risk adjusted value. But then, as I alluded to before, I used the word contribution. I may only contribute to, say, 50% of the outcome, because you may have a sales team. I mean, you may be doing, it may just be you doing all the work. So in reality, I can only take 50% of that as well. So we just went from 1 million to 800,000 to 400,000. So in all honesty, the value of which I could ever be associated with is actually 400,000. And then I price based on it. So that is the little bit nuances to just the highest level of value-based pricing is what's my price relative to the total outcome versus this more modified version which actually starts to think about your contribution, your attribution, and the risks associated with it. And that's what I would like to re-educate or rewire people as they think about value-based pricing.
I love that. And that's so interesting. It's such a nuanced way to think about pricing. And I think I've worked with a bunch of service providers who have either been in business for a long time or have recently left corporate or another job and are building an agency or service-based business for the first time. And oftentimes I see people make the mistake of starting out charging hourly or just sort of picking a number that sounds and feels good. And so I love the methodology of actually thinking about the impact you have on a business. With certain things, it's a lot easier to do that, like sales coaching. With other things, it's more difficult. It's less tangible or measurable. So if someone is coming to you and they're unsure about their pricing, how do you typically start to have that conversation?
So this is the pricing diagnostic or diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Let's zoom out for a moment. And I always like to say that until you understand the problem, you cannot solve it. So let's first get explicitly clear that the pricing problem, whatever that is, value-based, your method, let's get exceptionally clear on what this really is. That's the first thing you can ever do. And until you can actually do that, it's probably not the problem in which you should be focusing your attention on. So we'll get really clear in here. And you will notice, and everybody listening here, you will hear a lot of business strategy aligned with my pricing strategy.
Yeah,
I will
super tied together. Yeah,
exactly. I actually say sometimes that price is the chief of staff of strategy. If strategy is the CEO and all of your VPs are all of your business functions, it's really like price has this unique relationship with all of those business functions. And so you will hear a lot of business strategy. But getting back really to that point is when you start to think about pricing, please diagnose it first, understand if it truly is a pricing problem. And then the next lever is like, to what degree is it actually a pricing problem? There are variations to it, right? Is it me that I'm undercharging and it's a confidence issue?
right.
Is it that I'm mispricing, that it just doesn't align with my business model? Is it that I'm really searching for pricing power and I don't yet have it because my positioning is off?
Yeah.
Is really just starting to understand the problem itself as it relates to the pricing problem. That's where you start. And I don't think you try to solve anything until you fully vetted it. And one of my favorite saying is make sure you shine a flashlight in the dark first before you can try to solve it.
Yeah, I love that. And so figuring out, a lot of times people, when they aren't selling, they think they go back and it's either one of two things. They have a pricing problem or they have a marketing problem. And so they're either like repackaging, coming up with new things, coming up with new pricing, trying to like create a bunch of new stuff when actually they have a marketing problem. Or they go and they work on their website and they do all of this when really they have a product market fit problem, which I would say pricing kind of dips into that bucket.
Yeah, we're going to go big picture again, right?
Yeah.
And this is my other favorite line. So another thing you'll hear is I talk with my hands a lot, but I also will talk in anecdotes and nuances. It's hard to read the label from inside the jar. I didn't make it up. This is a common phrase, but I think this applies to what we're talking about right here, which is sometimes when we do try to diagnose this, whether it's a marketing problem, fit problem, price problem, strategy problem, is sometimes we are too close to it.
Yeah.
It's great to talk it out with somebody.
This
is why you have thought partners and coaches and consultants who help you see the label from outside the jar so that you don't just self-diagnose incorrectly.
That's right. I think it's so important to find those thought partners as solopreneurs or business owners, because it's oftentimes we're just kind of spinning, right? We're swirling around and you are too close to it, or you need somebody to bounce ideas and give you a different perspective, which is obviously why I started the sales circle, is for people to come together and sort of in community learn how to sell. But I completely agree with you. When you feel like you're stuck in an area, the best thing you can do is go somewhere and find the help. One of the things that the women I work with struggle with or are trying to do is raise prices. And there's a lot of psychology that goes into raising prices. I think there's a lot of strategy that goes into raising prices. There's a lot of sort of market conditions that go into potentially raising prices. And so, talk to me about how you coach people to think about raising prices when, number one, they already work with clients. And number two, potentially the economic climate feels a little volatile. And so there's some uncertainty around maybe they're actually able to raise prices. How do you coach them through those things?
Okay, here we go. We're going to go down many rabbit holes. So here's what I'm going to ask of you.
Yes.
I'm going to have you repeat questions and refocus, because I think there's a lot here and I think this is really important.
Yeah.
So when we talk about raising prices, let's start with this. And I will share, here's my disclaimer, which is these are certainly my perspectives. I may have stronger perspectives, and I want you to take it as that. This is not advice. This is certainly a perspective. And I will stand firm on that, which is one of the first things is when you think about raising prices, there's two nuances to that.
Yeah.
There is raising prices as we generally think about it, which is my price is $1,000. I'm going to raise it to $1,200. That's a price increase. That's raising prices, but that's not actually raising prices on your existing clients, such as actually raising in general, because I believe the process of raising prices actually only impacts two people, you and existing clients, not lurkers, not never buyers, not past clients. And as a matter of fact, most past clients that really worked with you are probably praising you for raising your prices finally. So there is a nuance to that. I just want to clarify that. And I think sometimes pricing, because it is both emotional and it is both logical, we have to rewire our brains in order to actually see it. So zoom out or zoom super in from first principles and look at it that way. That being said, so that's my first nuance. When it comes to raising prices, and what we recently talked about, you and I in the Honeybee Circle, is that one of my fundamental beliefs is that you need to prep. You need to do the preparation. Price raising actually takes preparation. And the way in which I look at it is I say start with price. This is my potentially unique approach, which is like start with price. 3 months from now, I want to be pricing at $1,250. What must I do in order to get there? What are the steps and the conditions that I need to change in order to get there? And so I firmly believe that pricing is the ultimate needle mover, at least from my lens. This is me being biased, right? But in order to do so, it takes preparation and work to get there. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't. So that's that lens. And you also had asked the question about the changing economics, right? And the challenge associated with it. I also have a thought, which is I zoom out. I ask this question all the time, even to myself, which is, what do I do in great markets? What do I do in terrible markets? What do I do in a fine market? And I try to zoom out and say, am I here to play this game for one day, or am I here to play this game forever? I mean, one of my goals, I'll tell you, and the rest is my philosophy is, I used to thought the goal was to win, but now my goal is to keep playing. That is a thesis of mine. And I want to wake up every single day, not care what day of the week it is, because I want to keep doing the things that matter to me. And so if I think about things and I think about even the economic factors, I have to zoom way out. And so how do I want to play this game? And when it comes to some of these, I might actually take a little bit of a rebel approach, which is sometimes it's important not to get defensive. It's actually sometimes important to go on the offense. And this may be a time where if everybody's getting defensive, maybe it's, you could take a calculated risk, or don't be reckless, but you could take a calculated risk and say, no, maybe as a time where I stand strong and I have to figure out if I'm preparing correctly, it's like, what conditions must be true in order for me to protect my price at this level, given the economic uncertainty, or what must be true if I wanted to raise my price in this time of economic uncertainty, with the strategy being, I may have less conversions right now, but at a higher price, I get to recoup some of those profitability concerns. And I now get to work with new buyers. I change my market a little bit. So 18 months from now, 27 months from now, when say things go the other way with it, you have now compounded interest on top of the moves in which you've made. So you've made a calculated risk. So I'm not saying to be reckless. I'm not saying to be offensive or not, or to be defensive. But I personally take, when it comes to price and business strategy, is to zig sometimes when others zag, or zag when others zig. And I think that's an approach I take, but it has to be methodical, has to be calculated. And as we talked about at the beginning, there's a risk adjustment factor.
Sure.
Think about it through.
Sure. And I've talked to some people in the sales circle who are interested in raising rates or providing more robust packages, because the margins that they have now in what they're doing are super thin. And we talked about this in the sales circle. And it's sort of this idea of making space for the things you want to do in the future. And so sometimes that means letting go of the things that you're doing now, even though it might feel like it's working. You only have so much bandwidth. And I see a parallel between that and what you're talking about with pricing, is that regardless of the market conditions, where do you want to be in the future? How do you want to keep playing this game 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 years from now? And how do you start to set yourself up for the long term right now as it relates to pricing? And I love the idea of leveling up during times of uncertainty. I mean, that is really like leveling up is sort of doubling down on your business, right? And I think it takes some confidence and some thought to be able to do that, because when there is this kind of freak out moment, we tend to freak out too. So it's take a deep breath. This is a moment in time. Where do you want to be? How do you want to grow your business? And don't let uncertainty in the moment get you off of your long-term path.
This is very similar to the fact, and let's relate this right to pricing.
Yeah.
It's the same way in Rich, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to raise my rates. That's my pricing strategy.
Right.
It takes calculation, takes thought, takes strategy, right? It takes consideration, understanding your downside, understanding your upside, right? If I want to make this move, now may actually be a great time, maybe a wonderful time for you to do that.
Right. Great. I love that. I want to shift a little bit,
please,
and talk about offer suites.
Okay.
This is a topic that I think everyone talks about, but very few people get right, is how to create a really beautiful offer suite that ladders up to price points and programs or services that you can deliver. Talk to us about your philosophy on offer suites and how you advise people to either create one from scratch or take a second look at what their offer suite looks like.
Offers always change. Price always changes, or at least they should, right?
Yeah.
We are evolving. We are adapting to what we learn from the market, but also who we are as experts. We get better with every single case study, with every single client, with every single encounter that we have. Even if we don't, actually, I take that back. Even if we don't we get rejected, right? Yeah. That is a learning point.
Absolutely.
So offers. So when it comes to offers, here's my lens: is the most important offer that you have to get crystal clear on is the signature one, right? And here's the best thing:
offer. Signature, core.
Exactly. Here's the great thing is there might be a lot of individuals listening be just shaking their head. This is one of those things where you need to be reminded more than you need to be taught, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's really just simple. And I think instead of going straight to complex, let's just go with simple. And I think the first thing you need to do is get really clear on that core and signature offer. I said start with price, right? Start with price. We want around that. And what is the offer that you must do or you must create in order to support that price point? Yeah. Because price can help all of that. Now, my philosophy is simple. I have the core offer. I like to have the gateway offer or the wedge offer or the bridge offer, which is strategically designed to build trust. That's what it's for. It's not designed for me for a profit lens. It is designed for me to build trust for individuals who have never worked with me, never heard from me, or haven't read my material, or just don't already have a lens of trust. I like to have that gateway offer. Now, for me personally, here's what I believe. That gateway offer, for it to be most effective, at least in my lens, is to be a piece of my signature offer. Instead of it to be just completely different, is to be a piece of that signature offer.
Yeah.
And so if my signature offer is some version of pricing strategy or pricing workshop, I said at the beginning of this conversation, which is I like to think about business strategy. So I'll do a business audit, or I will do a pricing audit, a diagnostic in a sense to get you to understand the problem more clearly so that the actual signature offer is more effective.
Yeah.
That's the type of and even if we don't proceed to work together in the future, that gateway offer should be enough. Here we'll use the word value, right? For them to take and run with it. But it's also getting clear. So I like the gateway offer structure, a front gate or a back gate, which is if it's a business audit or a price audit that leads to a pricing workshop, they are aligned, but they may not be perfectly connected. And so I like that structure, and I like that to break it off. On the backside, I do fundamentally have the belief, which is you should always have the next offer in the offer ladder to support the growth of your clients to a certain point. If you really have chosen I'll use the word niche or ICP, at some point, you may have a client who has outgrown you. That's okay. And if you don't have an offer to support them on the way up, have somebody else who does. Be able to refer them, have a referral partner who has a different kind of ICP or niche in a sense that you can actually transition it. So I would love to have, my ideal ladder would be something simple that gains trust on the way in, a core signature offer in which just really nails home your value proposition, not one that you under promise and over deliver, but that you set expectations appropriately and nail those expectations. A higher leverage offer, which may be a retainer based model, like you're paying for access, you're paying for strategic decisions, you're paying for certain items that is really, really bespoke. Sure. I like that. I love that word. And then if you don't have something past that, be able to shepherd that individual along and continue to create that value even in the next relationship if you choose.
And you mentioned, I love that. And you mentioned starting with price. I think starting with price and understanding how much money you need to make out of your business is incredibly important. We've talked about this before. A lot of business owners, small business owners, create a sales goal. Sort of, they pull it out of thin air. They say, I want to make 6 figures. I want to make 250, 500, $1 million without having any sense of, number one, how much money they actually need to make to live their life. And number two, what kind of services and packages and pricing it takes to get to that number. And so talk to me about the role of pricing within sort of, do you talk to your clients about top line revenue numbers and then helping them figure out pricing as it goes along? What do you think the role of pricing is as people are kind of setting overall revenue numbers for their business?
Well, I did say start with price or restart with price. So you could take that one of two ways. Start with price is go to market, right? This is the first price I'm uncovering. But in reality, it also applies to restart with price. Like what is the next price that I actually want to move up to? But let's forget about that for a moment. Let's just talk now fundamental principles, because what you brought up is knowing your numbers. Right? Yeah. You're talking about this.
And I know this is important to you too. We've talked about this.
Yeah. You and I have our own, you have a profit planner, or what's it called? I want to be clear.
Profit planner.
Profit planner. I have a tool, which is very similar. I call it max revenue. Basically what it does for my lens is it understands capacity. And I just like to stress test the relationship of price in your business model. And this is it. And you can use this as a tool to do so. I built it in Excel, or I built it in Google Sheets. And literally it's what it's designed to do. It's to take it out of your head and put it on paper. And it stress tests 3 things: the relationship between price, the time in which you spend in service delivery, and the time in which you spend on revenue generating activities, sales, right? Or actually delivering your service. And I say start there, right? Before you can get into any nuance or anything else, is just to start to understand the relationship that price actually plays on your business model, on your goals, on the time it takes you to deliver, and so forth. Because the moment that you actually know that, and you're like, hey, in my mind, I want to make $1 million, but your current metrics say, nope, you can only make 173,000. Right. All you got. And so it's like, start there. Don't go into more nuance. Start where it's like crystal clear and go back to those fundamentals.
Yeah. And then from there, when you realize what the gap is, going back to your point earlier, you can either figure out, okay, what price do I need to be pinning this service to, and then how do I build up to that value? Or you, what? Reset your expectations on how much money your business can make. Hopefully you're trying for number one.
Well, yeah. And let's continue our thought process just on those three things. So I want to make $1 million, but I can only make 173. Well, there's a few levers in which I can pull in this scenario, right? Let's go right into this scenario, knowing your numbers. I either have to really improve my service delivery, which is I need to be able to speed it up without losing any value.
Yep.
So one of those, how do I change my price, is improving the outcomes. And one of that could be your service delivery. That's one thing I do. Option number two is I spend way more time on revenue generating activities. Right? Mm-hmm. That's another lever in which I have to do, which means I spend more time doing the work, or I spend more time in sales, or I hire more individuals to do so. Or the third option in this lens is I change the price, right? How do I get to, those are the three levers in which you can pull in our constraints, in our box right now. Yeah. And so this is why when you put it on paper, you can actually see what are the strategic levers I need to do. And now I know those three things. What are the actions I can take that actually fundamentally will move it to get there, right? Now we've boxed out a whole other set of stuff. We've just brought it down to the core meaning and the core essence of this, but it's that type of move, right? It's apply the principles in which we just talked about to other levels or other areas of your business, or more depth in a sense.
Yeah. What are some tips that you give people for managing mindset around charging more? So we talked about this a little bit in terms of the economy, but I do think, especially for women, there's a big emotional component that comes to, and this is a lot of the work that I do, is just getting people confident to say how much their services cost, right? But then you're thinking about raising your prices or changing your pricing structure. How do you help manage mindset around that for your clients?
We've talked about preparing for the price raise or starting with price. Be able to say your price and not flinch at all, right? It's and literally one of the tips is say your price out loud. Talk to yourself in the mirror. And I'm being really specific on price, but one of the tactics itself is literally be able to say it out loud, because that's where most of us, we get emotional when it comes to pricing or how others think about us in the sales cycle and the process. And we've talked about this at length, which is there are many objections. For my lens, it boils down to really three, right? I can't afford you. I just can't afford it, which is objective. I mean, I might have $6,000 in my bank, but it's a $10,000 offer that actually screams value, but I just can't afford it. Right? It's, I don't see the value, right? Or it's, I don't trust you. And all three of those can go back to some version of emotional, which is you're too expensive, or I don't trust you, or they leave you as existing clients. So there is total emotional turmoil when it comes to sales and there's pricing. And if I have to think about the confidence element of it, is the simplest answer, but the answer that's not fun, is just putting in the reps, right? That actually is the simplest answer when it comes to mindset, is putting in the reps and just understanding that that's the key. But that's not a good answer. In all honesty, that's not a good answer, because that's hard. You still have to actually get yourself to move. And so some of the tools in which I use from a mindset perspective, because that's what we're talking about now, is in order to sell with conviction, you kind of have to price with confidence. And so you have to frame the value correctly. Is one of the things that I'll do is, this is the inside the jar sort of thing, right? It's hard to read the label for inside the jar. And when I get real serious about this and realize that I personally might be looking at this from the wrong mindset, is I have to either lean on those who are going to set me straight, or I have to go back to my training or my principles, which is, what are the things that I do, not just with price or sales, which ground me in mindset. So one of the questions I like to ask myself is, why am I afraid of no? Right? And what if I was not afraid of no? And there's a great quote, which is, if you reframe and say you're only 24 no's away from making $1 billion, if that were true, I would get the 24 no's as fast as possible. Right? And so it's those little mindset shifts. You either reach out to somebody else or you go back to your training. Now, these are principles that we are talking about. When it comes to pricing, start to say your price out loud. That actually, you start to gain confidence and start to gain power. So it's the little nuances that actually cascade into something much bigger.
Yeah. And I think the practice and saying it out loud is actually super important. People think that the confidence comes from the mindset, and I think the confidence comes from the competence. Doing the thing and getting better at it is where you get the confidence from. I don't think confidence is just naturally born in all of us in all of the ways. I I sort of I rage against the machine in that way, and people who are just like pep rally cheerleaders. I think there's a time and a place
Yeah.
for that, but I do believe that if there are points in your business, like pricing, like selling, that
Mhm.
don't feel good and you don't have confidence, the best way to do it is to do the hard work, to actually do it. And I love the idea. I talk a lot about practicing your pitch or sales calls or
Yep.
asking questions. I've never thought about just saying my price out loud over and over and over again until it becomes something that I don't, squinch at when you're saying it. So I love that idea. That's really takes it kind of to the next level of practicing and saying things over and over. It's like
Yeah.
your
You're
own little manifestation.
we associate price sometimes with our self-worth, right?
Yeah.
It's like that. And in all honesty, it's not. Price
Mhm.
is, well, you can call price a number of things, but price is like it's the bet that somebody is willing to place to
Yeah.
receive the value in which they perceived,
Yeah.
right? Price is the cost of entry. Price is the way in which allows you to keep playing this game, right? If you deliver value, true value to the world, the price is going to allow you to keep delivering that value.
Yep.
And there's this concept, and I'm going to shift it to, I will relate it back to this thing called the pain of charging, but the pain of paying. I mentioned this as well, which is there's a behavioral economics pain of paying. I first heard from Dan Ariely, behavioral economics, but I think this came from somebody else. But the pain of paying basically says the further you distance yourself away from money, spending becomes easier. It's why it's really, really, really hard to, if it's your money, you're paying with cash
Yeah.
versus paying with casino chips, right?
Yeah.
Really, really, really. The same is true with the pain of charging. When it's you as the individual,
Yes.
and it's your service, and my price is $1,500, right? That is associated with you. It's
Yep.
really close. You're doing the work. There's a pain of charging with it. If I am a company that says I'm a big Fortune 500 company that sells widgets or products, the price of that widget is $1. It's a very different pain of charging, right? It is
Yes.
so distanced from ourselves. So when we talk about this concept of mindset and like confidence in a sense, is just don't forget where you live in the area of like
Yeah.
behavior and
Yep.
human psychology. There's a pain of charging. There's a pain of paying. Just embrace that. It's true. And it's
Right.
like, what steps can I take to distance myself from that? And maybe part of it is just practicing saying out loud.
I feel like you are talking directly to me right now. I'm nodding my head and smiling feverishly because I grew up in sales and business development. So I've talked about pricing almost my whole
Mhm.
career. When I left and started my own consulting group 7 years ago, the mindset shift and the imposter syndrome and the stuff that I had to get over because I was no longer selling somebody else's product
Mhm.
or service. I was selling myself. It is a completely different psychology because you do feel like you are wrapped up in your price. And I love how you sort of separate the price from the self worth because it can feel like that, especially when your revenue is lumpy,
Mhm.
right? Like your sales funnel is not totally set or it's leaky. And so revenue feels very lumpy. Every time you have to say it, there's like that lack of confidence or that lack of uncertainty. I just love, love, love the idea of practicing saying the prices until it becomes, it just flows.
And then you plan 4 months from now to say, okay, I need a new price. And then you
Yeah, that's
start over again.
I've and it's true because over time you deliver better results. Hopefully you're learning something all of the time. You're getting faster and better at how you're delivering. And your clients are seeing value. And depending on the type of business, if you have retainer clients that are with you for months and months and months or years, that's one thing. But there are other types of service providers where you have shorter stints, right? There's like a sprint based or a project based thing. You're able to raise your rates and think about your pricing strategy pretty often. We've talked a lot about sort of offer suite pricing strategy. What about, is it different for those people who are retainer-based service providers? So this is more, I think of this as more like referral, word of mouth, have a few clients, but get in really deep, more like a fractional model maybe. Do they think about pricing a little bit differently than sort of the offer suite types of service providers are, or is it not a difference for you?
Well, I'll say this: the business model in which you choose should align with the pricing model in which you choose.
Yeah.
So let's go back, let's zoom out. I see five. I typically bucket them in five different pricing elements, pricing methods: hourly, which we touched upon before.
Mhm.
Let's call it fixed, which really is like that packaged, productized offer. There is the retainer model, in which we are kind of getting to now, which I see as like an ongoing monthly service. They're really paying for access. I always
Right.
believe that retainer is access. There's the value-based pricing, which we've alluded to as well, which is how do you associate value to the service delivery or the outcome in which you're providing? And then there's performance fees. So performance fees, which is called sometimes skin of the game, or however you want to call it, is associating the actual tangible outputs of what you deliver to your pricing. Really, really hard, really risky. The risk is actually on you, but also could
Is
have
that more
huge
like
upside.
commission based or
It could be here. The best,
deliverability based?
yeah, the best example is instead of value-based pricing, which might be the $1 million up front, right? You're
Yeah.
basing it on the perception of the value. Is you say, I will literally give you $1 for every $10 that you make me, but we're going to base it on the outcome. So even if it were, if it's $2 million, right, you're going to get a better result. And so it's
Right.
literally basing on the performance. There's an administrative burden associated with that, so I don't always recommend it, but it could be a good bonus. So let's just highlight those
Yeah.
five. Let's just call those five. And so when we talk about either the fractional model, what I always ask is like, are you operating in the business or are you advising the business? Right? Because there are different levels to this. So retainer-based model, when I typically see it, is getting really clear on the scope and the expectations, because typical retainers are paying for access. If it's a productized aspect, you deliver social media marketing, right?
Yeah.
Or you're a fractional or doing the specific ops. You're not just doing advising, but you're actually doing the work. It may look like a retainer-based model, but in reality, what you're doing is you're just taking a packaged style and doing it in multi-months. And so there are nuances to business model, which is why I would say, hey, come,
Yeah.
let's talk. Let's get really clear on what that actually means. But just knowing your business model and associated pricing strategy is really, really critical, because you don't want to charge a one-time fee for something that requires months at a time. And you
Right.
don't want to charge months at a time with something that actually packages at a one-time fee, because you could be leaving money on the table.
Yeah, that's right. I love that.
So I zoomed out. So to be in all, as you're bringing on the fractional, is I think this is, while you brought the fractional model, is I think this is applicable to anybody. Like any service that you provide is just aligning your business model and the offering with that pricing structure is going to get where it's going to help you maximize either the profitability, the revenue, or even your time. And so.
And I know a lot of women who, when they first leave corporate and they're building their agencies or they're building their consulting business, they start as fractionals. And that's what I did. And it was sort of the easiest path to getting my feet wet and understanding the kind of work I wanted to do and the kind of support people needed. And then as I went along, I started developing packages and I don't want to say a more sophisticated pricing system, because I think as a retainer, depending on what you do as a fractional, there could be a lot of layers to it. But then I got a more compact, I would say, pricing
Kind of your structure and so forth.
structure in place. Yeah. And I see that happen a lot with people as they're starting their consulting business.
Yeah. I would say, let's stick on that, because you said hourly.
Yeah.
Or you mentioned hourly before.
Yes,
And
which I have opinions about. So I want you to
sure.
go
No,
first.
let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go. Let's hear your opinion.
I just met with a woman yesterday who has 20 years experience in people management and is charging her clients by the hour. And I think that I think for certain types of service-based businesses, it makes a ton of sense. But when you have a high level of expertise, you should not be charging by the hour, because people are not just buying your time. They're buying the 20 years of experience that you've accumulated doing the thing that you do, and they're buying the shortcuts, the insights that you can provide. So that's my take on it. I would love you to yay or nay that.
If you don't have to charge hourly, don't. I'm not against, like, I understand there's
Yeah.
a time and place for it. And even when you first start, just like there's so many things that are overwhelming. You're like, I just
Yeah.
need to figure out how to run a business, because running a business and being in corporate are very different. Like earning an income and generating revenue, two very different things.
Totally
Like,
different.
like I understand, while I say, if you don't get your pricing right, you're leaving money on the table forever. I get it. Like, it's okay to start hourly, focus your attention elsewhere. But if you don't have to price hourly, please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't change it, because there are value adds there to you, right? If you very, very dialed in to your process, you're going to get profit efficiencies, revenue efficiencies in packaging your offer.
Yeah.
If you have in your expertise and you want to drive a retainer and provide for access, like they're paying for outcomes. First principles, what is the exchange fundamentally about between you and your client? The exchange is fundamentally about outcomes. That is fundamental. They are buying a future and perceived outcome. And if that's the case, then hourly is not actually in line with that statement.
Yeah.
That being said, I will say this, and if you are charging hourly, it's okay. If you don't have to be, try to find a way in which to adjust your pricing strategy to go into a different direction. And there are multiple options, and to really consider that from your lens and your business.
Yeah. I also just hate tracking time. I'm not good at it. I don't know. I undercharge all the time if it comes down to tracking time, because how do I account for the 30 minutes when I'm walking my dog in the afternoon, but I'm thinking about your business? It doesn't,
You just said it perfectly.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, at least. It's not to say that it can't work for someone else. The other thing about charging hourly is I think people start to nitpick at your pricing. And they start to sort of say, oh, this took this long, and it only took that other, it took an hour less the last time we did it, and why. And so I like flat fee and retainer based models based on deliverables. That's my fave.
Based on deliverables, based on outcomes,
Right.
based on impact. I
Yep.
totally agree with you. Some of your best thoughts are actually not at your desk, right? And it's really hard to charge. And sometimes you feel guilty, or even they like question it. And now you're just wasting time spinning a little bit. I started charging hourly. I will tell you all, I started charging hourly. Totally did.
Yeah. And then I think it creates friction in the client consultant relationship that is just unnecessary.
Yeah. And I know we're going really deep on here, and these are total perspectives. One of the lessons I've learned from that is I feared being seen as a cost. My whole thing was, I always feared being seen as a cost, and I wanted to find a way in which to become an asset. And so I built like my magic money box framework, which was, how can somebody know every single time they speak with me, talk with me, work with me, that I am an asset, and then I'm actually generating money or generating some output for them. And once I started thinking that way, I tried to figure out what's my pricing and what are my outputs and what are my value and what's the outcomes. And it allowed me, that was the framing that actually allowed me to move from hourly to something different, was how can I not be seen as a cost, and I can actually be seen more as an asset? And I found that was actually more in line, which was the catalyst to get me out of hourly.
I love that. And just to build on that, I talk about something called positioning yourself as an expert versus an advisor, which is a similar thing. I think as an advisor, people are coming to you for your expertise, but also your insight, for your experience, versus experts can kind of be commoditized in some ways. If you're an expert in something, there are other people who are experts. Not everybody can advise. And it allows you to think about how you position, how you package what it is you do.
I like that frame. I like that frame. I mean, again, all of our businesses are evolving.
Yep.
And you're right. Every single time we are growing, we are building. and we are making strides or making progress.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep going.
I know.
I'm just going to keep going
We
all day.
could keep going for a long time. And so you are definitely going to come back to the sales circle at some point, and we are going to keep the conversation going. I always love talking to you. It really is like such a joy. I think you are so smart and just have a clear perspective on how you can help people. And I am always learning something every time we talk. So thank you so much. First tell us, how can people find you?
Okay.
And what do you have coming up that people should know about?
What do I have coming? Okay. So I would say you can find me in 3 ways. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I do actually write a newsletter every single week called Impact Thinking.
Which if you are not signed up, you should sign up. I get it. And it's every time it hits my inbox, I open it up.
Thank you. It's been 111 weeks in a row, and I'm just not going to stop. Every Thursday morning at about 6:54 Eastern time. And so that's really the second way, is because I respond, I write, and that's via email. The third is my personal website, petergiordano3.com, like my entire name. We can add it in the show notes if you want.
Yes.
And that way you can access all of my stuff. So what's coming up? I will say this year is my 6th year in business. And so it is a great inflection point to reflect on the previous 5 years. I mean, as I do every year. And this is what I would call my replacement year, right? We started the year out with words, themes, and one of them was replace. And one of it was, I want to replace old revenue that is no longer working for me with new revenue that is more in line with my business model. And so I continue to think and refine and talk to individuals like yourself and other members and those that are outside the jar to really help me think about my business model moving forward. So This year, all right, I am also refining, and this is the year of replacement. That's what's going on for me. And I am sharing my journey both in the newsletter, but also meet me, have conversations with me, connections, because I'm learning and I'm sharing and I'm going about it this way.
And all of Peter's contact information will be in the show notes. Definitely sign up for his email newsletter. If you are not following him on LinkedIn, don't sleep on it, because he is sharing lots of insights and gems on LinkedIn almost every day. You're posting a lot, and I'm following you. So thank you so much. This has been great. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Until next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Girls Make Bank. If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Please review and share our show to help spread the word and help your girls make bank. And I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or visit honeybeesgroup.co. Until next time, friends.